The Toronto Raptors have had a very busy offseason, but not in a way that a lot of Toronto Raptors fans would have hoped. Today we're going to be talking about the offseason for the Toronto Raptors today, and my perspective as a Toronto Raptors fan on how I feel about this offseason for the Raptors, and how they can now move forward throughout this offseason period, and how I feel their free agency period has gone. That being said, if you do go on to enjoy, be sure to leave a like down below and subscribe to the channel if you are new. With that being said, let's get right into it. So, let's talk about the major moves for the Toronto Raptors this summer. Coming in, the main pieces being Goran Dragic and Precious Achiuwa via the Kyle Lowry sign and trade, as well as Scottie Barnes, of course, coming in via the 4th overall pick. They brought back via re-signing Gary Trent Jr. on a 3-year deal at $54 million, Team Burks on a 3-year deal worth $20 million, and Masai Ujiri is returning as a new deal now as vice chairman and president of the Toronto Raptors, and looking to be someone who will be here for the long term in Toronto, which you could argue was the most valuable piece of the offseason. Leaving the Toronto Raptors this summer is most notably the greatest Raptor of all time in Kyle Lowry, as well as the waivings of DeAndre Bembry, Rodney Hood, Aaron Baines, and Paul Watson. All four have left the Toronto Raptors, and none were significant pieces last year. Rodney Hood, of course, being the least significant, as he didn't really play once he came over due to injury. But DeAndre Bembry was a valuable bench piece. Aaron Baines, of course, as much as he was not great, and as I like to call him, and several others like to call him, he was definitely the tank commander. As we had a center last year, we probably don't struggle as much as we did. That's just a fact. Nonetheless, he's gone, and Paul Watson is now gone as well. And the necessary replacements or additions haven't really happened that people would have wished for. Jarrett Allen nor Richaun Holmes have been brought in. Some people would have liked to trade to try and acquire another star. That hasn't happened up to this point yet. And I don't personally expect it will, because I don't think the Raptors don't like any of their pieces of their core enough right now to trade any of them away to try and add another piece. Now, if they get a good deal or they can get in on good value like the Kawhi trade a couple of years ago, then sure. But that was an exceptionally good value deal for an all-star. If you look at some of the previous or comparable all-star trades over the last few years, the likes of AD, James Harden, you had to give up a heck of a lot more to get those quality of players than we did Kawhi Leonard, and sure, that was due to the scenario, Kawhi Leonard injury concerns, and just due to the fact that Popovich was petty and didn't want to let him go to the Western Conference. Nonetheless, it's resulted in a scenario where Toronto were probably not likely to make that type of trade this summer, because they're actually going to have to give up that significant value to do it. And so it leaves them in a scenario where their other additions this summer have been Isaac Bonga, Sam Dekker, Ishmael Wainwright, and that's about it. Now, sure, some of those guys could be valuable bench guys for us, maybe, but Isaac Bonga was a sometimes used, sometimes not used bench piece for Washington last year, and that doesn't say too much about his ability. Now, sure, he is lengthy, he can be a decent wing defender for us, but that's about it. Sam Dekker hasn't been in the league in 2 years, didn't really pan out that well as a former first-round pick of the Houston Rockets. Maybe he can come in and give us a little bit of space in three-point shooting, but those guys could be fighting for one of the roster spots as far as wing depth go on the team this upcoming season. And his Wainwright's on the G League team. I don't know, it remains to be seen whether he's going to even compete for a roster spot. But that kind of speaks to what we've done this summer. Now, I really like the acquisition of Precious Achiuwa, and I don't think people quite value the Precious Achiuwa acquisition as much as they should. Now, I'm also very biased in this statement because I personally just really like Precious Achiuwa's game. He's a very, very hardworking player, high hustle, high energy, great rebounder, very good rim protector, especially for his size. He has a very good athleticism, very good vertical. He's very good in switches on pick and rolls, as far as centers go, especially. So I really like what he brings to the table. Now, sure, is he an undersized center? Definitely. Is he still a bit raw offensively and could do some improvement on the offensive end? Yeah, for sure. There's no doubt about that, but he's almost 22. He's still quite young, just entering his second year in the league. He still has tons of room for improvement. And this is someone who showed a lot of positive flashes with Miami last year. He's going to make the winning plays. He works hard on the defensive end. He protects the rim. He works for those loose balls, works for those rebounds. He's started to look like he's improved his three-point shot over the summer, as he has started to take some three-point shots and made some three-point shots throughout the summer league with us. And that is promising because that's not something that we really saw Precious Achiuwa do at all last year in the NBA. So if he could start to space the floor a little bit as well, I think he can offer a lot to us. He can play center in behind Key Burks this year, and long-term could potentially be this future starting center of the Toronto Raptors. For Goran Dragic, I know there's a lot of fans that are very torn about Goran Dragic, and it's a tough one, right? Because obviously, it's not Kyle Lowry. Kyle Lowry's gone. It's nowhere near Kyle Lowry production-wise, or just the fact that Kyle Lowry has built an affinity and a love and a relationship with the city of Toronto and Toronto Raptors fans. Goran Dragic is still going to be able to come in and give us valuable bench minutes. I know he hasn't seen that happy to come to Toronto, and I'm sure he's not, and I don't blame him. He's leaving Miami, go to Toronto, which for financial reasons, for temperature and weather reasons, and for competitive team reasons, is just not a positive move for him, or probably even for family reasons at this point in time in his career. And so I totally understand it, right? Now, should he have made those comments in the media? No, I've talked about this already in the video. But point being said, he can still impact this team as a positive backup guard. He's going to bring some veteran experience and leadership into this team if he can show a little bit more maturity once he shows up to Toronto and be a professional, which I don't doubt that he will be. That being said, obviously the Kyle Lowry departure can't be understated. It's going to hurt. It really is. The on-the-court stuff is one thing. Just the locker room effect, the loss of his presence, his leadership, his voice. It's going to take a little bit for this locker room to adjust, to have its new leaders, and to be able to move forward. Fred VanVleet's talked about trying to assume more of a leadership role. Lowry's talked about how Fred tried to do that a little bit more last year, as he kind of realized Lowry probably wasn't going to be around for the long term. And so they're going to have to make that step now. Can OG step up a bit more in the locker room, or is that going to be VanVleet? Can Siakam step a bit more? Is Khem Birch going to assert himself a bit more in the locker room? That's the type of things you're going to have to look for in this group, and that's something that also has to be considered with the departure of Kyle Lowry as well. Of course, bringing back Goran Dragic hasn't really allowed for any cap space to make moves. It's not impossible that moves don't get made yet this summer, but I wouldn't expect anything drastic to the Toronto Raptors throughout the rest of the summer. For anyone that's been talking about the Goran Dragic trade, I think if the Raptors wanted to trade Goran Dragic, he would have been traded initially in part of the sign and trade to the Dallas Mavericks, because the Dallas Mavericks really want him. Because they need a point guard. They like Goran Dragic's veteran presence. He's a good playmaker. He's a very high basketball IQ. Would fit well in their system. And that's the point. Goran Dragic can still be impactful. Other teams want him. So don't just say he's a dud, because he's not a dud. Would have been a bit annoying what he said about the Raptors and a bit of a jerk, but he's not a dud. He can still help his team. That being said, with his salary being on the team at a bit over $19 million, we are going to be just under the tax threshold, so we don't really have any wiggle room as far as salary cap space goes. Make any moves. We still do have our mid-level exception, I believe, but I don't expect anything big for the Toronto Raptors throughout the rest of the summer. I think this is primarily the roster we're going to be going into next season with. And to be all considered, I'm not too disappointed with it. Are we a lock to be a playoff team? No, I don't think so, personally. I think the East is just too damn good. I don't think it's any knock on our team. I think the East is just too damn good. But I'm excited to see this team play next year. We have Trent Jr. back for another 3 years, his first full season as a Toronto Raptor. Scottie Barnes is going to be a member of the team. I'm really excited to see Precious Achiuwa, Khem Birch's full season as a Raptor. There's a lot to like still about this Toronto Raptors core. There's some young pieces. We're starting to build the next era while we currently still have the core of OG and Siakam and Freddie. I really like what we have going on here. I know it's not the offseason that a lot of Toronto Raptors fans would have liked. It's not the ideal scenario for me, sure. If you go back and look at my Toronto Raptors ideal offseason video, it's definitely not what I had panned out. But I think it's still a good offseason. I think we're working towards a positive future. And I like what we have moving forward. With that being said, that is my thoughts on the Toronto Raptors free agency period and offseason period so far. If you did enjoy the video, feel free to leave a like down below and subscribe to the channel if you are new. You guys have a great rest of your day, and I will see you guys in the next one.